Matikela, welcome to my YouTube channel. So today I want us to talk about accused number three's case. That's what we are talking about as we prepare to go into his case, because we are so over Danzi and Baloy. We are so over that. We've moved on before them. We are already preparing our heads and our minds, our hearts, our spirits for accused number three's case. We are done with Ubalo. He can do whatever nonsense that he wants to do. We don't care at this point. If focus here too is accused number three, because why is he not getting done with accused number two? We are not going to take that into consideration anymore. He must do whatever he wants to do. We don't care at this point. Anyway, so now we are already there. Simambela phambili. Okay. We are tired. We are tired of Balu's nonsense. This is not about a firearm. This is about this is not just about the firearm per se. That's what I'm trying to say, because I already did videos about this situation. Guy choose number three, because his case revolves around the so-called firearm. Okay, this is about a firearm that enters police custody in 2015. February 9th, February 2015, disappears into the system for years. From 2015, 2016, 2017, he gets convicted for the so-called firearm. And then 2018, he's serving. 2019, he's serving. 2020, he's serving. While he's sitting in his jail cell or Johannesburg prison, Sun City prison, others say Sun City prison, others Johannesburg prison. Well, he gets a visit from two police officials, Brigadier Gininda and Colonel Mangena. They come to visit him. They ask him a few questions about Senzo Meyiwa, and he's like, I don't know what that is. His brain is sleeping. This is me imagining things, okay? His brain is still sleeping. He's not, yeah, nothing comes to mind. He's like, and then they're like, oh, okay, then yeah, here's the picture. This is the man. And he's like, do you know this man? They don't ask him directly about Senzo Meyiwa per se. Do you know this man? He's like, not sure. Maybe, no, I don't know him. He's not quite sure. And then Jiggy Jiggy, they're like, oh, okay, then this is Senzo Meyiwa. And yeah, because this man was killed for 2014, 26 October 2015, where were you? He's scratching his head. He's like, what? Killed? He's still like, of course, it's 2020. It's July or August. I don't know. It's July 2020, ne? Yes, he's like, is it June or end of June or early July, somewhere there. He's like, he was still, because when you are going to ask him go 2020, where were you go 2014, get 20, your brain is gonna have a fog, guys. The brain fog is gonna come through. You're not gonna think about you will need something to trigger that memory. Something must trigger it so that you can like go back and be like, oh yeah, I remember. Other than that, you won't just remember. I'm sure that's what happened to him. I am so sure that's exactly what happened to him. And Ukinenda was like, okay, you are under arrest for this. So he's like, Aibo. And the rest is history. It's where we are today. Now, we are dealing with the firearm that came through the system, and it's been there since 2015, 16, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, when it's 5 years full. 2020, it was turning into 6 years, 2020, because now it's mid 2020. All right. Now he's sitting there thinking, me arrested. You see it in his face when he enters the courtroom in Boksburg the first time, the 27th of October 2015, sorry, 2020. He's like the one that first starts the toy. He's like, I'm not entering that door. Somebody needs to tell me, what am I doing here? You see the anger, the confusion, and everything playing out behind those masks and everything, because he's like, what the heck? He refuses to enter the dog. He's like, uneasy. And the others join in and they stand outside the dog. They're like, asingeni phayana ngoba asiyazi sizoyenza la. All right. That's what brings us to accused number three. Now, this firearm that is supposedly the one that killed Senzo Meyiwa You remember I say it disappears into the system for 6 years, plus almost 6 years. And it was supposed to be destroyed back in 2017 after he was sentenced. And somehow it survives that destroying situation near the itching process. Is it itching process? Okay. It survives that process of being destroyed. Then suddenly it comes back into the Senzo case like it was waiting for its cue, when it comes back. And now the biggest question is no longer only was this the murder weapon. The bigger question is, who fetched it there? We know it's Mangena. Who handled it? We know it's Mangena and Gininda. And can the state actually prove this is the same gun from the beginning to the end? That's where the problem starts. Because once a chain of custody starts breaking, the evidence does not just become weak, it becomes dangerous. Dangerous to rely on, dangerous to trust, dangerous to build a case on. And that is where this entire firearm story becomes explosive. All right. Now, the state wants the court to see a perfect line, but things are not looking good already because of Mangena. Because of Mangena. The state wants this gun story to feel clean, but Mangena made it dirty. Mangena made sure the story is dirty. A gun is found, it is booked in, it's found in 2015, it is booked in, it is booked out, expect, test it. Years later, the same gun is linked to Senzo Meyiwa. Simple, neat, convincing. That's what the state wanted. And that's how Gininda was thinking. Angithi bathu Gininda is smart. Clearly, he's not smart enough, Gesan. But the moment you slow this down, the entire operation, the entire propaganda down, the neat story starts falling apart. Because the chain of custody case, cases are never won by emotion, because of that. They are won by paperwork, by seals, by signatures, by registers, by dates, by continuity, not by assumptions. And here, the problem is that too much of the story seems to rely on assumption. Now, the first thing that we used to hear is that the gun was taken by Gininda for safekeeping. And that alone is very questionable. Perhaps we need to do a separate video about that. Now, February 2015, the gun enters police hands. I want you to come with me with the story. The firearm is allegedly recovered in February 2015 from a room linked to accused number 3. That is the beginning of official police chain. From that point, the law expects something very simple. Once police take control of the firearm or that exhibit of an exhibit, they must be able to account for it clearly, consistently, and continuously. That means, where was it kept? Who booked it out? Who returned it? In what condition? Was it sealed? Was that seal recorded? Was the same item preserved all the way through? Was everything correctly done? That is the burden of the entire chain of custody. Now, we cannot have all things like not we think so. Not we think so is not right. Not it should have been is not right. Not that that is how it usually works is not right. We can't deal with that. The burden is proof. Was everything done correctly to the T? And that is exactly where this matter starts becoming uncomfortable. And Mangena is in the center of it becoming uncomfortable. Because yes, the firearm enters the system, but what the court needs is not proof that a gun entered the system. The court needs proof that the gun, proof that this gun, the same one, remained intact the entire time and accounted for through every critical stage. That is very important for the entire duration. That is a very different question also. Do you understand? Now, the first red flag, it's ballistic in 2015. Let's look at that. The firearm is booked out for ballistic in February 2015, then it is returned. That should have been one of the safest parts of the chain. Why? Because once something leaves storage for ballistic, it should come back with a trade that is almost impossible to challenge. Signed out, signed back in, sealed number noted, condition confirmed. That is how you protect the integrity of evidence, right? Maybe let's not even say it's a red flag, perhaps, because for that case, they did everything right, but okay. But here is where the defense may found oxygen. The reporting around Captain Mchali's evidence suggests that when the firearm was returned from ballistic, the seal number was not properly tracked in the way you would expect for a high-rank exhibit. Remember that. And that changes everything. I suppose that's where the red flag for 2015 is, right? Because now the question is no longer merely, did the gun come back? The question becomes, how do you prove that the gun that came back is the exact same gun that left? That is the question that starts poisoning the whole chain. Now, there was years of silence in the firearm. There was years of silence. We move. 2017, Umtu gets sentenced for the firearm and whatever crime. Then we go back. Then there comes the part that should terrify any prosecution trying to rely on physical evidence. The gun sits in the system for years, for almost 6 years. Not days, not weeks, not a short administrative delay. 6 years, almost 6 years. And during that period, the firearm was even reportedly marked for destruction. Let that sink in, Kesan. A gun now being presented as central to one of the biggest murder trials in South Africa was at one point supposed to be destroyed. Tell me, how was this gun going to be destroyed if it was ever linked with Meyiwa murder crime? And if the projectile that Mangena found on the crime scene was linked to this firearm when it entered the system in 2014, because Mangena's projectile was supposed to be on the system already by 2014. Guys, come on. These people are playing with us. These people are playing with us. A gun now being presented as if it was the one that killed Senzo. That alone in a courtroom is earthquake, guys. Because never. Because if an exhibit is marked for destruction but survives, then every question about controls becomes sharper. Why was it not destroyed? Who stopped that process? What paperwork preserved it? What exactly happened in that gap? Who had authority over it? What was recorded and what was not recorded? And if these answers are not airtight, the defense does not need to prove tampering happened. They only need to show that the state cannot exclude possibility. That is the trap. Now come 20 July, the day everything blows up. Now we arrive at a date that matters most, 20 July 2020. This is the date that turns the firearm story into a legal battlefield, because this is where the firearm is fetched again for ballistics. And according to the court, the court reporting, the person who fetched it was ballistic officer Christian Mangena. That is the moment the chain should have been crystal clear, right? Who handed it over? What condition was in it? Was it sealed? What seal number was there? Who signed it? Who verified it? This should have been the easy part, right? Instead, it became the most damaging contradiction in the whole firearm saga. Now we were left asking, was it sealed or not, or unsealed? This is where the courtroom tension becomes deadly. Captain Mangena's position, as reported, is that the firearm was in a sealed exhibit bag. Not only that, he goes further. He says ballistic would not accept an unsealed bag. That sounds strong. That sounds confident. That sounds like Mangena knows his story. That sounds like witness trying to reassure the court that procedure was followed. But then the defense puts another version on the table. Sorry, but a statement attributed to Mangena suggests the firearm was received in an unsealed bag. Now stop right there. Do you see what Mangena did there? I don't know why he did that, but he did it. Because once that contradiction lands, the whole room, the entire courtroom should change. Why? Because this is not a small discrepancy. This is not a memory lapse about time or wedding. No, this is a direct clash on the condition of the evidence at the very moment it changed hands. Mtshali says sealed. Mangena's statement says unsealed. Both cannot be true. Someone is lying, and we don't know why. And once both cannot be true, the court must start asking a dangerous question there. If the witnesses cannot agree on the condition of the exhibit when it was fetched, what exactly is the court being asked to trust? Now, we also have the confessions that hurt the state. And then comes the part that makes the defense argument bite harder on the entire situation. Mtshali reportedly concedes that there is no documentary proof showing the firearm remained in a sealed bag, in a sealed exhibit bag throughout. That is huge, because courtroom battles about evidence are often decided by the difference between what a witness says should have happened and what the record proves did happen. That difference is everything. A witness can say, this is how we normally do it. But if the register does not confirm it, if the seal number is not captured, if the continuity is not documented, then the court is left with practice without proof. And in a murder trial, practice without proof is not enough. So now the defense, you can see why they don't need to prove a switch. This is where many people misunderstand the chain of custody fights. The defense does not always need to prove, yes, the gun was definitely swapped. That is not always their part. Sometimes all they need to do is to show you cannot prove it was not. That's it. That is the difference. And once an exhibit can no longer be tracked with confidence through seals, numbers, and continuous records, then doubt enters the room. Not emotional doubt, not social media doubt, legal doubt, reasonable doubt. The reasonable doubt is enough to wound the value of the firearm evidence badly. because the prosecution's dream is certainty. And the prosecution dream is certainly being destroyed in life. The defense only needs uncertainty. Then Gininda takes the firearm. He takes the firearm. What makes the story even more intense is that after the firearm is returned, it is then booked out again for Senzo Meyiwa docket. So on the same day, the firearm moves through critical hands. That creates even more pressure on the paperwork, because every extra movement means every extra step must be accounted for precisely. The more important the exhibit, the less room there is for vagueness. And this is not some ordinary exhibit. This is the firearm the state wants tied to the murder of Senzo Meyiwa. So the standard is not supposed to get softer. It is supposed to get straighter. Instead, what the defense appears to have found is the opposite: a chain with gaps, a sealed dispute, and documentation that does not fully kill the substitution argument. That is devastating. Now, the case is no longer just about the gun. At this point, the firearm stops being merely about ballistic. It becomes about institutional credibility. Because what is the court supposed to believe? That the gun sat in police custody for years, was supposed to be destroyed, was later fetched for further testing, had disputed handling at a critical moment, lacked full public proof of seal continuity, and yet the court could still treat the chain as clean. That is very hard to sell, guys. And once the court starts doubting the custodians, it can start doubting the path. Once it doubts the path, it can start doubting the results. And once the results, and once it does the result, the prosecution's reliance on the firearm becomes much weaker. That is why the testimony matters so much. Not because the gun disappears, but because confidence in the gun starts disappearing. So do you see why all of this is problematic? Do you see everything about the firearm is problematic? Everything. Anyway, what are your thoughts when it comes to this? Let's talk in the comment section. We will continue talking about this point because I want us to, it's just that the video is already long. I don't want to make it very longer than it is. I want to hear from you. Now that you hear all of this about this firearm story, what are your thoughts? Thank you. Bye-bye.